from a business perspective, also digging into these influencers and being like, well, how are they making money right now? So they have a free Shopify course. How are they making money off that? Oh, wait, Shopify is paying out hundreds of dollars per new customer for affiliate. The first time I did 100K in profit a month, I was like, oh, dude, this is amazing. I have a multi-million-dollar exit now. Yeah. Great, let's go call my friends in venture capital. Hey, guys, I'm doing $100,000 a month. They're like, we don't care. Like, what about, like, what else are you doing?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
else did you do?
If you leave, is this business still gonna run?
Champ, thank you so much for coming today.
Of course.
We've had an excellent Capital Club so far, and I know we're a little bit drained, but I wanted to get an opportunity just to talk about your story a little bit, what you have going on, and then be able to see what we can provide to the community, and see if we can provide any value for them. But thank you so much for taking the time to come on, and after this long week that we've had, getting some more energy out to have another video.
It's our job, man. Yeah. It's a pleasure and an honor. I'm happy to be able to speak to your community, so it's no problem.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Well, let's start off a little bit with kind of like your early days. This community specifically is for agency owners. So I wanted to dive a little bit more into that side of your story that maybe a lot of people haven't heard a ton of, as far as like the details. Maybe they know that it's happened, right, but I wanted to dive a little bit into those details and how you came up. But let's go into like early life. Like, certainly, where did you start off? Like,
certainly, and yeah, I'm happy to, because I essentially ran a Web3 marketing agency as an arm of my business, but it was not really publicly formalized. So a lot of people don't even know that I was doing that. So we can talk about that today. But yeah, as it pertains to sort of my start, in January of 2022, and I'll keep this very succinct, I looked around at a particular market, a consumer market, that being the cryptocurrency market and the NFT markets. I noticed that there was, a quick Google Trend search would have told you at the time that things were skyrocketing. But the intangibles were also alerting me that this was a good place to direct my attention from a brand and product perspective. That being when your mother or your aunt is like, hey, what are these NFT things? I saw it on Jimmy Fallon, things of this nature. And I noticed that there had been a massive spike in attention in the space. And it was a space that was congruent with skills that I had been learning for the past 4 years. I had been trading these markets, not NFTs specifically because those were newer, but I also happened to be already very experienced with trading that market as well at a time when very few people will, but crypto since 2017, right?
Okay.
So I looked around at the content side of things. I noticed there were very few YouTubers. There were very few content creators on Twitter, and I noticed that there were even fewer that I felt were doing a really good job and using their traffic efficiently. So I decided to start creating content on YouTube and Twitter. Right decision at the right time. It began growing very, very quickly. Actually, about 3 months after I started creating content, I started my first online business. Well, not my very first online business, but my first one at this scale, called Champs Only. That was a trading group, a paid trading group, and we launched 1 year up front. Passes for 1 year up front. We launched, it's a subscription business now, but we launched them as NFTs at the time because that was a vector that made sense because everybody was paying attention to that space. And we launched 1,444 passes for about the US dollar equivalent of 700. It was 0.25 ETH at the time. Sold them out in about 30 minutes. And then I spent the next year after that working on that business, growing that business, staffing it out, and eventually converting it to a subscription business. But as it pertains to your question and sort of the agency side of things,
or even like your early days, like before crypto, what is it? Had you tried other businesses?
Oh yeah, dude. I tried everything, right? With varying degrees of success, but never enough success that it really impacted my life.
Like early on, or?
Yeah, very early on. Like when I was in college, I spent 2 years running a streetwear and sneaker botting and flipping store. So but by the way, ICOs and mints immediately made sense to me because I was running bots to buy sneakers and to buy clothes. So I would bot Supreme drops and flip those, and like that would be like at a maximum maybe like a few $1,000s a week. So,
Right.
or less usually. So, but that was really like my first experience with online business. I was able to make some money doing that. And also in the meantime, I learned a little bit about personal brand because my first experience with personal brand was actually as an artist doing music, which not that many people even know. It's not like a secret.
Yeah.
But I guess it's just never that big, right? So I had also in the meantime just kind of been throwing paint at the wall over and over again in my life. And then, eventually you do that enough times, like you're bound to finally make the right decision at the right time, which is sort of that combination you need. But yeah, what I was going to say is that also after launching that business, one of our core revenue drivers that first year was actually me and a team that I had built out acting as essentially a Web3 marketing agency.
Yeah.
Which is probably different than most of you community members, but I mean, internet marketing as a whole, like we
do have some Web3 agencies.
Okay, good. So internet, it's internet marketing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, basically advertising, doing marketing, but for like crypto tokens or NFT
things of this nature.
projects
Things of this nature.
Decentralized net exchanges, things like that.
All types of things. Yeah.
Okay. And what was your like first project where you're like, wow, this actually works. Like I can do this.
Oh, what was the very first project that we,
or maybe the one that you had like the most success on and you're like, okay, I can actually do this. I should advertise my services to more people.
Yeah. So to be honest, there were quite a few projects, and I didn't even advertise my services that much because I had a lot of deal flow due to sort of the personal brand. But I can give you a couple examples, or I'll give you an example on like the NFT side of things.
Sure.
Or one that I felt like was a great display of competency. There was a project called Bad Influence that launched, and this wasn't one of the first ones, but funny enough, this was actually like one of the later ones before I kind of began shifting my focus to other things again. But this was an NFT project that we helped launch at a time whenever things had really, really begun taking a downturn, right? And it was one that I will candidly say I was like very nervous for, and I didn't know if we would be able to pull it off. And I was like very nervous that this was going to be the first, like, I don't know how you say, like stain on the, you know what I mean?
Yeah, big failure.
You know what I mean? Because you fail in public in this space. And we shifted strategy last minute to have the first 1,000 supply be free. And made like a couple. Anyway, we made a couple last minute adjustments, and I don't think the minutia is all that important, but we were able to end up selling that out, and it was like one of those sort of by the skin of my teeth situations and I was just like essentially like, thank God we didn't blow that up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, we also talked a little bit about how in your early stages you didn't have a traditional experience of an agency owner because you made a ton of money right off the bat, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And how did that happen? How do you think that the ability to read the trend of the time and position yourself correctly, how did that?
Yeah, so what's funny about that is it actually really informed my perspective on how to handle marketing for my agency, because when I sort of sit down and analyze why I was able to do that, it was because of a very trusted personal brand that was my own at the time. It was because of timing, that being I had really just started it, and I was, we talk about money, love, speed, right? I was able to move very quickly and capitalize on and then delight those users who were still very interested in my personal brand because they're pretty new to it. Right. So, I mean, at the end of the day, like how that was able to happen was that, they say like you become an overnight success, or it takes years to become an overnight success. And it requires a high degree of awareness. It requires a lot of intentionality as far as looking around, paying attention to market trends and where user attention is going, right? And they're simple tool, like we were talking about Google Trend Search earlier. But it's not one of those things that, I mean, I suppose unless you're very, very lucky, which some of us are, it just falls into your lap, right? It requires a high degree of attention of figuring out where users are paying attention. And we're at Capital Club, and we were talking the other day in one of the keynotes about the ability and the importance of not chasing money, but positioning yourself where it's going to go, which is something that sounds kind of like a base level platitude to people who have no experience doing this. But this market was a great example of that, right? Because the only reason this was able to happen is because I had 6 months of prior experience in this market whenever there was a total addressable market of like 500 people. You know what I mean? But as I looked at the technology and as I looked at the IP being built, I made a bet with my time on the idea that this was going to be a very popular industry. So that's what allowed it to happen. When you look at it from an uninformed perspective and you're just like a new market participant, you're like, oh, this guy is just capitalizing on a new trend. But it's like, we started before it happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's something interesting as well, because being able to give your time to invest into a trend is different than giving your money to invest in a trend. Because a lot of people don't necessarily have that cash to be able to like, oh, I'm going to do my own NFT project. I'm going to put everything up front so I can launch this project. Some people just had their time, or they could maybe buy one of those NFTs to get started or whatever. And I think it's important to note that you chose the route of like, hey, I'm going to trade my time in order to make a bet on this trend, because that's, in reality, that's what a lot of agency owners do.
Right. And it's, well, whenever you're just starting and you haven't amassed any capital, it's really your only choice.
Right.
And then, at least in my case, the objective was that you make enough money that you can then begin scaling by trading money instead of time, with more versions of yourself. And I'm assuming most of the people in your community that are running agencies have decent sized teams working for them. But yeah, at that time, all I had was I had no money. Like I literally had no money. So I didn't have the option of, I don't know, hiring out teams to do research for me, things of this nature.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I do love the agency space, because for me, it's like the lowest risk thing. Because I mean, you risk your time, but when you don't have money, your time doesn't actually really matter that much. And then you also have the ability to scale quickly because you can just reinvest all the money that you make.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what I love about the agency space. But yeah, in the community, we have people that are just starting off. I kind of put them into 3 categories: just starting off, trying to break 100K per month, and then like the other people that are looking to exit 8-9 figures, whatever their multiple they're looking for. So we do have quite a wide variety of people. But one of the things that I wanted to ask as well is, obviously we're in a bear market right now, and there aren't projects jumping out left and right. And you obviously were able to figure this out and able to pivot yourself. How were you able to basically kind of reinvent yourself? Sure, you might be still in the same space, but how were you able to reinvent yourself to be able to address the bear market and just be like, hey, I'm not out on my butt anymore, and I don't have a job until the next bear market comes around, or until the next bull market comes around?
Have you ever read Expert Secrets by Russell Brunson?
Yeah.
That's the framework. So that entire book is essentially about, we can distill it down to sort of 3 steps when he talks about how to become an expert, right? And to reinvent yourself, you essentially have to establish yourself as like an expert in a new light, right? And I know that's maybe doesn't seem like it's the case for everyone. It's kind of a loose metaphor. Some people are entertainers, some people are this or that. But like for the sake of this analogy, we'll say you have to reestablish yourself as an expert in a new field. And the way that he describes it in that book, we can distill down to essentially 3 steps, which is to create a platform that you can use as leverage to speak to really intelligent and well-known individuals, which is why, by the way, everyone and their mother and their father is creating a podcast, to take the time to synthesize that information and truly understand it and make your own, and then to represent it in a new way that is unique to you, that establishes yourself as an expert and an attractive character in your own right. So I looked around and was like, wow, I've made some really great friendships with a lot of really smart people. And as I've done that, I have never asked any of them for anything, because I thought that maybe there will be a time when I do need to call on them for something, and they will gladly say yes, because all I've ever done is give them value. Right. So in my case, I looked around at a lot of these relationships that I had, and I was like, well, why don't I just start bringing them on the channel, right? Mm-hmm. Because they weren't sort of like Web3 native at all. They had great entrepreneurship and sort of lifestyle advice. So I began calling my friends and being like, hey, you want to do a video? So Sebastian came on, and then the other Sebastian came on, and then Luke came on, and then Brett came on, and then Justin Waller came on, and then Jordan Welsh came on, and a bunch more that would come out in the future, right? So what you're watching right now is essentially me on, and dude, this is the framework. Yeah. Every big YouTuber, by the way, has social hacked in one way or another. Every single one of them. Like this, it's not like a new thing. Right. So what you're seeing right now is sort of me in step one of that framework, or rather sort of step two, where I'm sort of synthesizing and representing that information in a new light. And what, assuming I'm successful, will come out of this in less than a year is an entirely revamped personal brand, wherein I've been able to usher people into trusting my perspective by leveraging the relationships that I've been able to form with people that they already trust. Right. Now, from a business perspective, I had to, sort of make a complete overhaul as well. And I won't get to we don't have that much time, so I won't get overly into the minutia of it. But I had to figure out how to do a number of things which had, I don't mean to sound dramatic, but which had never been done before. Yeah. In the Web3 space, right, which is like not that rare, because it's not a very old, but which was figure out how to successfully expire an NFT collection, a digital collectible, how to do it in a way that actually rewards people who are holding these expiring assets, as opposed to just completely, putting them in a bad position. Yeah. I had to also make sure that those people wanted to come back and pay me again via a vector they were not used to using at all, which was a monthly subscription. And I had to do it at a time whenever most Web3 businesses were like literally going bankrupt and failing. And that was challenging. And I was doing sort of both of these things at the same time. But I truly believe that basically all content creators and probably entrepreneurs in general have to reinvent themselves like every couple of years. Yeah. And I'll do it a bunch more times, I bet. So yeah.
And what was the kind of the principles that you used, or, because obviously once again it was checking out market trends and seeing where the market was going to be able to reinvent yourself. You couldn't just be like, oh, today I'm going to do this and then hope it works, because since you've gotten that experience of being able to read those trends, what are the things that you look for maybe someone else that wants to reinvent themselves or feels like they need to, if they're still in their Web3 agency? Or
you mean that is like, what would I be looking at for those who are trying to figure out what to reinvent themselves into? Yeah. Well, I think it simply depends on, as does basically all business, like figuring out who exactly you want to serve, right? And because that was what made it make sense for me to start having these people on my channel, for example, is that I wanted to serve, I wanted my audience to become, I wanted to do business for sort of like the general internet money entrepreneurship space. It was a larger total addressable market. It was people with whom I had probably more common interest. So I sort of like reverse engineered it from there. Okay, well, what creators are they paying attention to, and what type of videos are these people creating, right? Mm-hmm. How are they handling titles and thumbnails? And then they're upselling into a mastermind, you know what I mean? And you start to discover all these things. And then it's just like about reverse engineering from there. But the funny thing is that and when it comes to internet business, like there's no secrets, right? If you have a little bit of money to like spend, and because some of these things are paywall gated, if you want to really see how they're doing it, and just walk through the funnels of 5 creators that you like. And I know not all your agency owners are publicly facing individuals, but I still think that this would be a useful exercise for them, because a lot of these influencers are running agencies in their own right? To just click through them, and then sort of juxtapose that with like who I want my audience to be, and what I want my offer to be. And of course, like, there's no shortcut to figuring out like what your business is doing. But and sort of doing it that way. It's a similar process to what I just said with the content. It's like synthesizing all these things, and it's like, okay, well, how does this apply to my skill set and my objectives, which I'm assuming for most of your community is internet marketing, or all of your community, right? Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Wanted to go back a little bit into your big boom with your marketing agency. One of the things that we talked about is that you had huge demand really quick.
Right.
And obviously with huge demand with any agency, you need to have people to be able to fulfill that service. How did you go about kind of backtracking and be like, oh, dang, I have a ton of work to do, can't do it all myself, need to hire a ton of people, and I already have the work on my plate?
Yeah, so the first thing that I did was just do it wrong, right? And try and do it all myself. And the work got done, but I suffered a lot. So then I had to go about, as you said, like building out a team, and I kind of had to, as many entrepreneurs do, like build the plane on the way down, right? Yeah. So in my case, what that looked like was looking around in my community, which already existed, and finding like outstanding community members of my own, or just like DMing people who I thought were outstanding marketers in my niche, and trying to hire them, because it was an emerging market, right? And it wasn't one of those things like I couldn't go on. There was no Upwork for MySpace. Right. You know what I mean? Like I couldn't. That wasn't an option. So it required a lot of like kind of manual work on the interview side. Yeah. And it required a lot of training. But at the end of the day, like if you are doing everything for your agency right now, that means that you know all of the skills, which means that you can train people to do all of them. Mm-hmm. Which then sort of boils it down to like, well, is it a good culture fit? Is it a good like work ethic fit? And do I trust this person? Yeah. So that's why for me, it made sense to like grab outstanding community members of mine that already existed for my other offer, because these are people who were loyal to me, and who like were essentially showed me that they wanted to be around and wanted to be present all the time without me even paying them. So it's like, okay, let's bring them on. And I elected to, I'm somebody who is happy to cut percentages here and there if it means that it makes my workflow more efficient and makes my life better. So I tried to be pretty generous from like a rev share perspective on these deals, because I felt like it would, motivate these individuals to do an outstanding job. And in my case, that certainly paid off. But maybe that's not appropriate for every agency. And there's situations where it makes sense to just like hire a VA or a couple VAs and train them. But in my case, I found like true partners, because what was important to me was like the reason why I was bringing people on is because like, dude, I don't want to have to constantly train and micromanage you. Like I want to be able to do other things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And then also be able to trust them too, that they're going to do the right job and not go off and spend their time doing something else because they're actually being invested. Well, exactly. Skin in the game.
Exactly. Which is, by the way, because I know everyone listening to this is an agency owner, which is, by the way, a huge problem that I've encountered in the last 6 months of my life, because you can imagine that in sort of the position that I'm in, I'm approached by agencies all the time for a million different services, short form agencies,
thumbnails, all of it.
All of it. People that want to run new offers for me, sales team, all these things, right? And I am so at the end of my rope with marketing agencies in general. And I truly think that there are people listening to this who could benefit from hearing sort of the customer's perspective, because a lot of them are probably working with people like me, running offers or things of this nature, which is that like, I am at a point right now where I'm close to just entirely stopping my work with agencies and just paying more to hire out people, because I am so tired of paying people large sums of money and not getting a proper amount of like attention and care from them. Right. And it's very frustrating and I think that it's easy and it makes me reflect on running my own agency as well as, I was probably doing this too. Right. Because it's easy to just like, okay, we locked in the payment up front. Nice, another paycheck. And then like, we'll get paid out another percentage on the back end. Like we're managing this client, we're managing this client, we're managing this client. But to be honest, I would argue that if you can find a couple of really, really good clients and delight those clients and get them to return to you, you're probably going to make more money. And also I can tell you from my perspective that word gets out very quickly about these agencies, like among the people to whom you are selling, assuming you're selling to people with some degree of network and influence. Yeah. And dude, here at Capital Club, I've talked to probably 10, 20 people who have told me the exact same thing, had the same experience. So I say that to say, as I reflect on my time running my marketing agency, I probably made that same mistake. And it's unfortunate to me that there are probably individuals who would say that same thing about my services. So just kind of as like a tidbit is, if I could go back, that's the thing that I would try and avoid with my agency, because I think it probably would have made me more money because I probably would have had more of these people return for my services. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, generally in one of the principles that I always or things that I always kind of look at when I see marketing agencies is generally the ones that kind of are the loudest are the ones that are the worst at what they do. And by that, I mean, like, they're sending out the cold DMs. They're like, I'll do this work for you for free. Look at this thing that I made for you. They're sending you constant cold emails. It's a lot of cold outreach. I've never been a huge fan of, just because generally in my mindset, like, those that are the loudest are the ones that have the least deal flow, and are not the best at their job, because a big part of the revenue of an agency should come from referrals, word of mouth, from people talking about you. Yes, you can run ads. Yes, you can do all these things, but a large professional agency owner does not need to go out and send cold DMs and say, look at this video I made for you. Look at this thumbnail I made for you. Do you want me to hire you? Or can you hire me? That is so valuable, because, for example, all the best agencies I've ever worked with, do you know how I found them? I texted or called one of my friends that does what I do, and I was like, hey dude, like, I'm so tired of all these kids DMing me on Instagram. Like, who's legit that I can work with? Like, at the higher levels of the game, like, that's how people are finding agencies. Yeah. So as a matter of fact, when it comes to like marketing your own services, when you're an agency, like, if you can get one or two high-level clients that have a good network, like, the best way you can market yourself is to go above and beyond and give them an incredible experience. Do you know what I mean? Instead of looking at it as a paycheck. Or even if they don't have a network, just giving someone an incredible experience where then you get a case study. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, they talk too, like, business, just as agency owners talk to each other and we have our communities, so does the business owner that you're targeting and going after. Like, if they have NFT projects, odds are they're in a Web3 community where they're asking who's the best agency to work with. If they have an e-com brand, odds are they're also in an e-com community where they're asking who's the best agency to work with. Dude, if you crushed it in Web3 right now, you will not have to do any marketing for your agency, because the entire space is going to look at you and be like, how did he just do that right now? Do you know what I mean? Like, especially right now. You know what I mean? But like you said, you make a great point, right? Like, they're doing the opposite. Like, the services suck, but they're doing a great job with lead gen. You know what I mean? They're DMing 1,000 influencers a day. And I just like, I wanted to offer that because I'm not sure because I've been on both sides of it. Right. And I'm not sure how many people you've had sort of come to interviews for the community that can give you that perspective of like what it feels like to be approached by agencies all the time. And I think that, I don't think I've ever worked with somebody who's approached me that way. Because I know that they are desperate for money, which means that they're going to take on as many clients as possible, which means that I'm going to get no attention from them, which means that my time is going to suck.
Yeah, precisely. And one of the big things that I wanted to kind of finish off with is we always give everyone in the community kind of 3 different pieces of advice. As I mentioned, we kind of have 3 different audiences: people that are just starting their agency off for the first time, people that are trying to make that 100K MRR with their agency, and then people that are looking to eventually exit their agency. I know you haven't exited anything yet, but just from your experience or knowledge in the space, what advice would you give to those 3 groups of people?
That's a really good question. So for those people starting out, I think we actually just we're talking about the most important thing that I would say. But my advice would be to sort of, as we're just talking about, not go so wide and go deeper when it comes to client acquisition. And I know that can be frustrating to hear whenever you don't, maybe you literally have like no connections, right? But what I was talking about, I was interviewed by somebody yesterday as well, and Mark Joyner was talking about this as well. In my opinion, right, with the internet, with Twitter, with and everybody watching this has friends, some online, right? Probably in the entrepreneurship business space, so they're already in a good position. I would argue that there is somebody you can DM, either cold DM and get a response, or who is a friend of yours, who is 5 connections away from somebody who's going to make you $1 million.
Yeah,
I truly believe that, because that's the experience that I've had, the experience that a lot of people here have had as well. And I would focus on getting 1 or 2 clients that you feel like you're punching above your weight and delivering them an incredible experience. Yeah. And if you don't feel like you can do that, then your agency and your product probably isn't ready, and you have to prepare your services to actually be able to provide a valuable experience.
Yeah.
Because if you can't do that, you're never going to get to the next level. But once you do that, and by the way, like you said, start establishing case studies, which is going to fuel your marketing agency and fuel your marketing in the case of most agencies. When it comes to scaling to 100K plus a month, it's another thing we talked about earlier, which is like, dude, stop trying to do everything yourself.
Yeah.
And there are going to be people that are watching this going to be like, oh, well, I'm not. Like, but you have to really sit down and really audit your time and like really rewire the way your brain works. Because I think a lot of very successful people are obsessive and micromanagerial by nature, and they think they're delegating work, but they're not.
Right.
Wherein they have a team, right? And it's like, oh, I have a manager that works under me, and then they have a couple of VAs under them. But it's like, dude, how many times a day are you still calling that manager and pinging that manager to make sure they're doing the right things, right? Yeah. And like, how much of your day-to-day time are you actually spending still micromanaging these people? And are you truly putting yourself in a position where all you have to do on a day-to-day basis is creative work, high-level work, and figuring out how to build new systems that are going to acquire new clients for you, and also give more clients at the same time great experiences? And I think that most of us, if we sit down and audit our time on a weekly basis, who say we've built out great teams and automated systems, are still spending too much time managing these people. And the much harder thing to do than micromanaging these people is learning how to actually train them, like learning how to actually turn them into fully competent versions of yourself. Yeah. And until you do that, you're going to be bottlenecked forever, right? And then when it comes to, because you're right, I haven't exited my business yet, but we've talked about exiting businesses, and we've spoken with many people who have exited their businesses here at the Mastermind. And something that was really poignant that I think we spoke about yesterday is, that whenever somebody purchases a business, why are they purchasing a business? It's to get an ROI on those dollars, just like when you make an investment, just like whenever you essentially buy anything, right? If you're buying consumer products, you're getting an ROI of some sort of value versus what you paid for it.
Right.
And I think you must keep in mind that people are not only, to achieve that ROI, people are not only purchasing cash flow, which is what I was sort of under the disillusioned impression of like half a year ago when I began speaking to investors, right? And I very quickly learned that, okay, in order to make this thing ready to sell it for a number that I want to sell it for, because I'm still having discussions with a number of my friends at venture capital, people aren't just buying the cash flow, they're buying the systems that you've built, right? And the frameworks that you've put in place and the SOPs that you built and the knowledge that you've imported upon all the people who you're going to leave there after you sell the business. So I think a lot of us can focus on like, oh my God, like I remember and that's the number one thing that, that I would advise people to understand is like, dude, no one is ever going to buy your business if you leaving is going to mean that it doesn't make money anymore. Right. Do you know what I mean? So specifically in my case, where it's pretty attached to my personal brand, that's a big challenge. And the sooner you start thinking about those things, the sooner you're going to be in position to like make sure that you're in a position to actually do that. So that's what I would say.
Awesome, my man. Well, really appreciate your time. Really appreciate you coming out here. It's been great getting to know you at this Capital Club. And really appreciate the knowledge that you've been able to give to the community. And I hope to see you more involved in the future.
Of course.
Possibly we can do something else. But thank you so much for coming out.
Of course, man. I'd love to come meet your community. I am just like you, still a student of the game, but there's certain things you just learn with like time in the field. So anyway, brother, I appreciate you having me on the channel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or excuse me, in the community. And we'll talk soon. Peace.
Yeah. All right. Once again, guys, thank you so much for coming out. Many of you will listen, but few will actually take action. And I will see you guys on the next one.